and the Methodist Church globally, how it was started and its theology and so on. So we'll talk about that. And we won't have time for questions from the audience at this part, but around 8 o'clock or so, whenever we get done, we'll have refreshments just out here. And that's always the best part of the program, I think. Not the refreshments, that didn't come out right. The best part of the program is when you can ask questions of these folks one-on-one. And they all enjoy doing that, and they're more than happy to do that. So think of what you'd like to ask, and we'll do that in about an hour. The last one of these we try to have these every quarter. And a lot of you were at the last one, and we announced that the next one was going to be at the mosque in South Charleston. Some of you remember that. And we were really looking forward to that. Unfortunately, the imam there, our friend Nasir Abdul Salam, who's on this panel also, had a pretty serious medical issue. And he's getting better. He's recuperating. We saw him a few weeks ago. But if you could remember him in your thoughts and prayers, that would be appreciated. When we went to see him, Rabbi Yarecki in his home prayed for him in Hebrew and then in English. And it was an interesting thing to watch. With all that's going on in the world, that was probably the best little 2 minutes that encompassed what the Root&Branch is really all about. So that was good. We always want to recognize clergy who were here. And I met right here, stand up please. This young man used to be the minister at Aldersgate out in Sissonville. And your name, tell me again? David Peters. Thank you, David. And over here we have, tell me your name again. From? Okay, good to have you. Who else am I missing? Yes, sir.
Jack Lippard, retired United Methodist.
Okay, glad to have you. Who else? Yes. Okay, glad to have you. Welcome. Who else? Yes, sir. Okay, and the gentleman there I know. Yeah. One of the last times I was here, he got a service. Yes. From where? Oh. Wrong question. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes. Oh, of course. Rabbi Blair.
Adam Herman from Jacob non-retired.
Yeah. Rabbi Berman took over for Rabbi Yarecki. And Rabbi Blair is kind of having some health troubles too. Okay, did I miss anybody else? Okay, welcome. We're glad you're all here. Okay, last thing before we start. If you have a phone, please silence it, turn it off, or turn it way down or something. I'm going to sit down and start with the conversation with this. Well, let me say one other thing before I start. The way these have worked historically, we've met in, like at the Women's Club, or I hate to use this word, but neutral places. And those were fine, but we've, in the last 6 to 8 months, started having them at houses of worship. We had one at the synagogue, we had one at the Catholic Church downtown at Sacred Heart, and it's just a different feeling. It's a different feel, and we like this a lot better. So, but the way this works is I call up the pastor, in this case, Reverend Bias, and we had never met. And I said, you know, we are from this group, Root&Branch, and we'd like to have you come on our panel and talk to us. And he said, okay, that'd be good. And then I said, well, and we'd like to do it at your building. Is that okay? And he said, yeah, that'll work. And I said, I hear you got a great organ over there. Yes. Could somebody play that for us? He said, yeah, we'll do that. And then we always have refreshments at the end. Oh, we'll take care of that too. So the folks here couldn't have been nicer. A big salute to all of you for all you've done, and especially Nan McDaniel, who's helped us so much. Okay, thank you. This, to those of you who don't go to church here, is Reverend Tim Bias, also known as Dr. Tim Bias, also known as Pastor Tim Bias. But around here, I've found out in the last 2 weeks, everybody calls him Pastor Tim. Is that right?
Sure.
And that doesn't offend you in any way?
No, my name's Tim. I go by Tim. That'll be fine.
Okay. Tell us about yourself first. Where did you grow up?
I'm a West Virginian, grew up in Milton. Graduated from Milton High School, attended a couple of years at West Virginia Wesleyan, then graduated at Marshall.
Wesleyan's a Methodist school, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And after Marshall, you did what?
I went to graduate school, seminary at Emory University, Candler School of Theology in Atlanta.
Okay.
Then came back to West Virginia to be under appointment as a United Methodist pastor.
So you had a PhD at that time?
Well, I'd like to think that. It's a doctor of ministry. It's called a D-Min, and we know what Jesus did with demons in the Scripture. So it's a doctor of ministry, a professional degree.
Okay. All right. And you came back to West Virginia?
Yes. I started at age 20 in Putnam County, my first church. It's still there, so I didn't destroy it. At age 20, so I served 50 years under appointment. There are a couple other people in the room as United Methodist pastors who have done the same. And then I flunked retirement. I retired 2 years ago and then was asked to come and serve here.
The math has got me confused. You came back at age 20?
No, I started at age 20 when I was a student at Marshall.
Oh, okay.
Went to seminary and then came back. I was actually 26 when I came back out of seminary.
Okay, I understand. And tell us the places you've worked as a minister.
Well, Buffalo and Putnam County. I was at a church in Atlanta on staff there. Came back to Kanawha County to Tornado at Humphreys Memorial. Went to Elkins, then to Clarksburg, and then went away to Nashville, Tennessee, to work on for the national level of the United Methodist Church. Then went to Peoria, Illinois, to Peoria first. Left Peoria and went to Cincinnati, to Hyde Park. Left Hyde Park and went back to Nashville. Then
are the national headquarters in Nashville?
What I worked for is one of the national boards of the United Methodist Church. Okay. And then was brought by a bishop. I do what the bishop tells me to do. And brought by a bishop back to Columbus, where I worked as a district superintendent.
Tell us, like in the Catholic Church, the bishop sits in Wheeling and he's over the diocese. Is that right, Molly?
That's correct.
And what's the bishop in the Methodist Church?
What's the bishop in the Methodist Church?
Yeah, I mean, he's over all the ministers?
She is over all the ministers.
Excuse me? Flunked that already?
Her office is right down the street at St. Mark's,
okay.
United Methodist Church. The conference office is there.
Okay.
She's been here 2 years for us, but she's been she was elected bishop 12, almost 16 years ago.
Okay.
So she's been serving in northern Alabama and in eastern Tennessee, and now is serving with us here.
Okay. Okay. Good. How does one become a Methodist minister?
Well, it depends on which Methodist minister you're talking to.
How did you become a Methodist minister?
Well, we talk about in the United Methodist Church, we talk about a call to ministry. So there is something that moves within us, and that's the mystery, that there's something that moves within us that brings us to a point of saying yes to God, and then being before groups of people in the church that then either affirm that call or tell us that we probably misunderstood what was going on. And then that's a longer process. There are a couple of roads you can go at that point. I did the way of going on to college and then to seminary and getting my degree. There are ways now of what we call licensing schools, where you may not go to college, but you still can be licensed to be appointed to a Methodist church.
Okay. Okay. Good. And when did you come to Christ Church?
2024.
Okay. Let's talk about the history of Christ Church in the Kanawha Valley. It started way before this building was built, correct?
We've been here 220 plus years.
Wow.
There are people in the room who can do this better than I can, but I'm going to see if I can do it. We began as a movement, as a Methodist society in 1804.
Wow.
We met in the home of, her last name was Williams. I just need to get the right page in front of me.
I see. It's all right.
But that was where it started, and they met there or other places for 20 years, and then moved on, built a log structure that was somewhere along the way here on Courier Street, I think between Dickinson and Hale. Okay. And we were there for a few years before we built a structure on State Street, or Virginia Street. It's one of those streets that we were on for a while. That was a building that replaced the log cabin. And then from there, we went to either one of those other places, because State Street, they began to decide, I guess they went to Virginia Street, but at that time they decided they needed to move out of the city and move to the edge of town in the farming area. So they moved to that corner of Courier and Morris. I think that was in 1910 or sometime like that. That's when the building that sat on this site was built. And so from the time it started to up until 1939, the church moved 4 times and changed its name 4 times in 135 years.
Okay.
We've been at this location since that 1910.
Okay.
There are people, again, who can tell this story better than I can, but we had a massive fire here in 69, destroyed the sanctuary. So in 73, there was, the building was completed. There were some things that they decided to do at that point. One of them was to remain at this location. The other one was to be open to the community as serving the community whether that was with worship, education, service, you go down the line. We wanted to be a church that was open to the community. And the third thing with that, as they talked about it, was that they would build a structure that met those needs. And you're sitting in that structure now.
What did you, I know you weren't there, but where did people go to church for 3 or 4 years till this was built?
One of the members of this church was Dr. Riggleman, who was president of Morris Harvey at the time. And so they were meeting in an auditorium at Morris Harvey. And that was, I guess they could have met at Morris Harvey if Dr. Riggleman wasn't a member of the church,
right.
But that helped pave the way, and met at Morris Harvey during that time.
Okay. And you got a new organ somewhere along the lines. There are 2 organs in here, right?
There are 2 organs in here, and one of those organs was in the State Street Church.
Okay.
The State Street Methodist Episcopal Church. And I'm going to let David Donathan tell that story, because I'm messing up all this other stuff. He'll be right on the deal.
No, you're right on point with all of that so far with the history.
David, you go right ahead.
My name is David Donathan. I'm the Minister of Worship Arts and organist here at Christ Church. And it's a joy for me to be able to spend a few minutes and tell you about the instruments, plural, that are in this particular room. This pipe organ that you see behind me was installed in 1975, just 2 years after this building was completed. It was built by the Holtkamp Organ Company in Cleveland, Ohio. Walter Holtkamp Jr. was the designer of it, and it was built in what was called the Organ Reformed movement, which was returned to the building styles of J.S. Bach. Okay. So in 1975, this organ was installed. It's a mechanical action instrument. I came here in 1992 and quickly became a student of the church's history. So I was able to find out a lot of history about the organ that was installed in the State Street Church in 1903. It was the first pipe organ this congregation purchased. It was the second pipe organ ever installed in a church in Charleston, with the first one being at St. John's Episcopal Church just a few years before that. And this was because of the efforts of a gentleman in America by the name of Lowell Mason, who was the father of American music education and also American church music, because he was pushing the idea that churches should return to the practices of European churches and instill those changes here in America. So in reaction to that, from what I have read, this congregation purchased their first pipe organ, hired their first choir director, and hired their first organist in 1903. Okay? Wow. So that instrument served that congregation. They moved out of the State Street Church. They met at the YMCA while this building that was here before the fire was being built. And in 1914, the instrument that was in State Street went over to Simpson United Methodist Church over here on Shrewsbury Street. The new church here had a bigger, larger pipe organ in it. So I arrive on the scene here in 1992 and learn this history. And I was having a conversation with Dr. Ernest Watkins, who was at Shrewsbury, and I was telling, at Simpson over on Shrewsbury, and I was telling him about the history of the organ that was in his church. And he said that the organ at that time was in disrepair and they were trying to figure out what to do with it. And I stepped out in faith and said, well, if you decide to sell it, Christ Church will buy it back, since we originally purchased it in 1903. So because of the archive materials here, I was able to find a descendant of the chairperson of the organ committee from 1903, and that family provided the funds for us to purchase the instrument back from Simpson and bring it home, basically, to Christ Church. Okay. So for the past 20 years, those organ pipes have been stored here at Christ Church while we develop the plans and raise the funds needed to bring this piece of our history and a piece of Charleston's history back into the life of this congregation. So after years of planning, establishing trust funds, collecting memorial contributions, and thanks to the generous donations from 3 estates who left money to this project after they had passed on, Last December, we were able to install this instrument here in this back corner of the room, and it consists of pipes from the 1903 State Street organ. What you see across the front are actually new pipes, but the pipes behind it are all from 1903. And the first time we used it in conjunction with this instrument was on Christmas Eve just 7 or 8 months ago. So it was a very special moment for this congregation, and I was just an emotional mess because 20 years of planning and waiting and dreaming had all finally come to fruition. And it was always a goal to bring this element of history back into the life of this church and back to the life of Charleston. This particular part of the instrument was built by the Holtkamp Organ Company as well. A gentleman by the name of Chris Holtkamp, Walter Holtkamp Jr.'s son, runs the company now. And before Walter passed away, he gave his blessing for this design that his son did. And so it was very important that we keep with the same builder. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to play a little bit, and then you're going to sing with it. Okay? So I'd like to ask you to open your hymnal to number 379. They're in the connectors there between the chairs. This is the hymn Amazing Grace. I think all of us know this particular hymn. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to improvise a little bit on the antiphonal organ. I'm going to then improvise a little bit on the main organ. I'm going to bring the two things together, past and present, coming together. And then you'll hear a marked change in the dynamic. And I'd like for you to stand, and then we're going to sing these verses of Amazing Grace. And you'll get to experience the sound and the breadth of this instrument in this particular space. So it's number 378, and you'll know it's in the main hymnal, the big, thicker, blue-covered hymnal, okay? First the antiphonal, then this, and then I bring it all together. So I just want you to listen for the first part, and then we'll stand and sing. And keep in mind, what you hear coming from back here is what our ancestors heard 120 years ago.
Thank you, David. Wow, that's pretty good. Pastor, let's talk about the Methodist Church, the big Methodist Church, the worldwide Methodist Church. Tell us how that started. With some of us. It's an easy question. It'll only take 60 seconds to describe the history of the Methodist Church.
Yeah. We've been around about 300 years. Yeah, that'll take just about a few minutes. The Methodist movement actually began as a renewal of the Church of England. John Wesley, Charles Wesley, I think there was a man by the name of William Morgan, there was somebody else. They were students at Oxford College at that time, and they met together for study, but they also prayed together. That was in 1730. It wasn't formally established in the United States until 1784. So there was that period of time, 50 years, that the movement grew in England. The Holy Club would meet, the students gathered, they invited other people. One of the distinctive marks about Methodism is that it was built upon small groups. Wesley called them class meetings. There were bands, he called them. There was a place in all of that at some time that if you were growing in your faith, you'd get a ticket and you'd get to receive Holy Communion and stuff like that. So we hopefully we've come a long way. But there was that was to help people in their discipline in terms of growing in their faith. And because there was a method of study, I mean, they added not only the study that they had in college, but they had prayer, they studied the Scripture, they had Holy Communion on a regular basis, they had a moment of fasting. And they developed a method about that. And it was not a positive term when they were first called Methodist. It was a derogatory term because they had a method to that. Now, there were other things they were called too, like Bible moths, because they stayed in the Bible a lot. And it was all a derogatory kind of thing. But with that, Wesley began to develop what we now have as spiritual disciplines that we in the Methodist Church call the means of grace. And I just mentioned those: the prayer, the Bible study, fasting, Holy Communion were the basic ones. In the Methodist Church, we've added Christian conferencing when we want to have conversation with each other and not be upset with each other. So we've added that. That's the biased opinion. All my opinions are biased opinions, of course.
When you say method, that, you tell me if I'm wrong, that means there's, instead of just everyone on their own doing whatever they want to do about spiritual growth, there's actually a method to it.
There was a pattern that they would follow, and every time they came together, they had to answer certain questions about their inner life and how they were related to the people around them. And at that time, there may have been other questions about their sinfulness. So they had to answer those questions to the people who would be holding them accountable and praying for them, and that was the method.
You mentioned fasting. Tell me about that, please.
Well, it's when you don't eat for a day.
Is that what it is? And how often do you do that?
Well, the Wesleyan fast was once a week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was, I think the way it was established was it was from Thursday to Friday. Thursday evening to Friday evening, or Thursday noon to Friday noon. It was called the Wesleyan fast, and what it was, those in the Holy Club would gather at those times when it was possible to continue the focus on the Scripture and on prayer.
And today, how often does one fast? Depends. Huh?
Well, there are some of us who are disciplined and will do a fast, or participate in a fast. My perception is we don't do that as often as once a week, and when we do, we're not doing it in conjunction with other people. In our culture, we've kind of taken that, and if we do anything spiritually with the fast, it's usually a private kind of independent thing.
Okay.
And not with a group of people who are asking us tough questions.
Let me tell a quick story. I was at the mosque in South Charleston during Ramadan, and Muslims fast from sunrise to sundown for 30 days, is that correct? And this particular time, they were meeting in the evening to eat, and there were 200 people there. And I was at a table with the gentleman who was kind of the head of the group, and he was all excited to talk to us about what this meant and what that meant. Well, he passed the time when it was sundown. It's like 8:32 or whatever it was. It was all very, very specific. And there was an older gentleman beside him, and he kept elbowing him and saying, "It's time to eat." I'm sorry. John Wesley was considered the founder. Fair?
Yes.
And Charles Wesley is famous for something else, and that is?
For hymns.
Right.
He was a hymn writer, yes.
I would bet everybody in this congregation has hymns. Well, I don't know. Do they in the Catholic Church have hymns that he wrote?
I believe we do.
Okay.
If you sing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing,"
Okay.
Charles
All right.
Wesley wrote that.
Yeah, I think everybody has hymns that he wrote. Okay. All right.
So these holy clubs,
Yep.
not only was there an inner growth, but there was also, they began to say, we need to live this faith out in the community. So they began to visit prisoners. The language at the time was that they began to care for widows and orphans, people who were marginalized. And they even actually started some schools for children with education. And so this gave birth to, in the Wesleyan movement, to what Wesley would later call personal piety, the growing inside, and social holiness, which was the way it got lived out in the world or the community around them.
So it wasn't good enough to just feel it and keep it inside. You needed to share it or show it.
Yes, you're right. I'm not going to comment on that. It was not good enough. Yes, that's right.
Sorry. Okay. And how did it spread from England to the United States?
Well, there are several ways that happened, and one of them is that this was the New World, and there were people coming to the New World from Europe and from England particularly, and the Methodist movement had spread across England, so people who were coming from England to this country wanted to establish Methodist societies. That was one thing.
Okay.
One of my favorite stories about John Wesley is that, he's kind of a fledgling priest in the Church of England, and he has an opportunity to come to a settlement in Savannah, Georgia. So he comes and thinking that he's going to be somewhat of a missionary with this stuff that he's talking about, because he did not want to start a denomination. This was a renewal movement in the Church of England. It was not his desire to do that. But when he came to Savannah, the reason I like this story is he had a girlfriend. They broke up, and she began to date somebody else, and he refused to serve him Holy Communion. So they put him on a ship back to England.
Oh, really?
Yes. So Wesley wasn't in the United States very long, but it was his experience on the trip back to England, I think, with the Moravians, that actually drove his faith deeper within. That kind of solidified the movement in England.
Okay. Were there missionaries that would spread the word? Or was it more just families that came here?
I think it was just families that came. There was not an established church. The church wasn't established as a Methodist church until 1784 at a Christmas conference in Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
So people who came, they had those Methodist societies.
Okay. We talked about, you and I, the Methodist way. Tell us what that means.
Well, there's some distinctive marks that Wesley had in terms of this discipline that he had, and some things that many of us as Methodists still hold to, and that is Wesley said, do no harm, do good, pay attention to the ordinances of God, and those were the things that helped us cultivate that grace of God. Prayer, Bible study, Holy Communion, fasting. And then that was lead to the depth of this personal piety and then living it out in the world with social holiness. So it was those things. It was that kind of pattern. That became the Methodist way. Now, there have been other things talked about, marks of Methodism, and I think one of them is in a little booklet that he wrote called The Characteristics of a Methodist. And he said, in that book, I think the things that he said was that people called Methodists, number one, love God, and they rejoice in God. And I think it says they also pray. So he had some things distinctive there. And one of the things that this is my opinion, that we've lost in American Methodism, and that is Wesley gave room for persons to grow in their faith to encompass other traditions. He was saying that you didn't give up the tenets of your own faith, but it was that love of God that you were cultivating in your own life that allowed you to love people who may be thinking or acting or living differently. The reason I say, and that might not be true for all of us as Methodists, but the reason I say it's not true is that when we've begun to allow the culture to give more shape to the faith than we do about the God that we're following, we begin then to separate ourselves. And the Methodist Church, coming to this country, did that on several occasions. And one of them was when the church was first established in 1784, when it became time close to what we call the Civil War, the church split. There was the Methodist Episcopal Church, the regular church, and then there was a group of people who split and became the Methodist Church South. That gave way to some people that didn't like to have bishops, so they became the Methodist Protestant Church. And so Methodism split at that point. We say it was because of the Civil War. It was over, I think, the ownership of slaves. In 1939, in this country, there was a uniting conference that brought those three back together. Now, I'm not sure where the Methodist Protestant Church is in Charleston. This congregation here has always been a Methodist Episcopal Church from the northern side. In 1939, we established another Methodist Episcopal Church South, which is St. Mark's.
Oh, really?
So
I didn't know
that's
that.
Methodism has had that kind of thing in 1960, and that's when the church here took on the name of Christ Church. Up until that time, it was the first first Methodist Episcopal Church of Charleston. In 1939, it became Christ Church. So it's not always been Christ Church, but Christ Church, Methodist Episcopal Church. 1968, there was another merger with the German-speaking part of Methodism. Up until this point, we've all been talking about the English part, but the German part was the Evangelical United Brethren Church, established by William Otterbein in this country. And in '69, that merger came, and then that's when we became known as United Methodist.
Okay.
And then I should probably just leave this alone, but more recently, we've had another little split, and so we now have a United Methodist Church, and we now have a Global Methodist Church. And that split is over, my opinion, theological and cultural differences.
Yeah, I've talked to people about it. Does gay marriage have anything to do with that?
I think it has a lot to do with it, yeah.
I understand. I won't say anything else. The Methodist Church, all those together, is the largest church in West Virginia, I think. Is that correct?
If you take all of them together, yes.
Okay.
I would think that that's still the case. The United Methodist Church used to be, but since we've been through our little divisions, the United Methodist Church may not be now. But if we take all the brothers and sisters called Methodist, we're probably still close to the largest.
And is Christ Church the largest Methodist church in West Virginia?
Well, we'd like to think that, but I don't think we are.
Oh, really?
No.
Who's bigger than this one?
There are probably a couple of other churches in other places. There's a church in Morgantown. There's a church in Bridgeport. That doesn't mean that this church at one time was it was the flagship church of Methodism in West Virginia. It has always been a leading church in that sense of Methodism. But in recent years, part of that, a big part of it, was when Union Carbide closed or left the area, and DuPont leaves the area, and other things. Because this church, many of the people who were a part of this church at that time were from Union Carbide.
Yep.
And those of you who have been there know that a lot of people come from Houston. A lot of people go back to Houston. That's part of what's happened here.
Yep.
And then you add to that, with that same thing around what all of us have experienced with COVID, and with some other changes in population in West Virginia. So Christ Church itself has experienced some of that decline.
As has every other denomination in Charleston.
I would think that would be fair. There are two churches that are not in an area like Charleston that are growing, and one of those is in Morgantown, and one of those is in Bridgeport. But I think Christ Church is the third one at that point.
You talked to me about this before. Tell everybody what this is.
You want to know that now?
I do.
Must be close to 8. Folks, in this church, one of the things that's important to me, and since I'm the pastor, it's important to everybody else, is understanding racial injustice and working on educating ourselves in terms of who we are as people of God and bringing people together. So several years ago, I was introduced to a calendar. It's called the History of Racial Injustice. And every day on that calendar, it lists something of some kind of event that's taken place in the country about racial injustice. This past year, I've handed out almost 700 of these. Not only to this congregation, but I gave them to the bishop and the people around the bishop, and I've given them to other people. And I realized last week that I still have 50 of them left. Didn't know how many of you would be here. I don't want you to have to fight over them when you leave. but they're all rolled up with a little ribbon when you leave, and there'll be somebody that'll hand them out. In my opinion, who we are as people of faith, we're helping our community, not only our gatherings, but the whole community, to live together the way God created us to live. And again, it's my opinion, one of the big sins that we have in our culture is still racism. Yeah. And most of that, I'm going to be generous here, you all can help me, but I think most of that's due to ignorance. We do not know how that's intertwined into our lives and into our relationships. And this calendar, if it does nothing else, helps us become aware of what we do not know. It's not to make anybody feel bad. What it is to say, I can make a difference in this community when I know what I need to do. And so when you read one of these each day, if you're praying people, you'll ask God to give you the strength to make a difference in the relationships of this community. So they're outside there, and I asked Mark if I could hand them out, and it must be close to end time.
No, not
he made
quite.
me do it.
Not quite.
Okay.
Thank you. I wanted you to tell everybody that. I want to ask all three of you now. Suppose I wanted to join the Methodist Church. What would I go through? What do I just, I mean, how much of a process is that?
Well, again, that's it depends on individual churches, but the very minimum of that is because we are a Christian congregation, we would want you to profess faith in Jesus Christ.
Okay.
One of the vows you take to become a member of the church is that you vow to resist evil in whatever form it may exist in the community and in the world. So I've just given you one way you can do that. Right. You ready to be a member of the Methodist Church?
I have so many sins. I'm trying to cover all the bases.
So we're resisting evil in whatever forms they present themselves. Those are the commitments that we make beyond ourselves. And then to the United Methodist Church, you're pledging to uphold the church with your prayers, your presence, your gifts, your service, your witness. And that kind of is, that's the end game. Depending on the congregation, and I've done it different ways over the years, there may be classes where you're learning somewhat about what it is to live by faith, how that gets lived out in a particular community, what it means particularly for a church.
Okay.
But there are some that make you go through lots of stuff, and that may be good, but not all that stuff's necessary.
Okay. Molly, let me ask you, if I wanted to join the Catholic Church, what would I go through?
All right. Well, first of all, I'm glad to be here. This is very nice and so wonderful. I feel a little bit like when I'm in a beautiful place like this to affirm the faith and the Christian faith found here, which is one of the things to say about becoming. If a person were to become Catholic, if they're already baptized, their baptism is recognized. We're all one church. So that is definitely a recognized aspect of becoming Catholic. It is almost a year-long process, generally speaking, when an adult, so I'm specifically speaking of an adult. In fact, I should pause and say, I'm a cradle Catholic, which means I was born and raised with my grandmother teaching me the rosary and with the liturgical cycle right in my, it seeped into my daily life and the air I breathed. But if somebody were coming into the church as an adult. The process is newly called the OCIA process. It used to be called the RCIA process. It's pretty common. You'll encounter it. My husband has been through the RCIA. That's the it's now called the Order of Christian Initiation for Adults. And it's a process that follows the liturgical year. Beginning in the fall, there's a period of inquiry, and then if someone is invited, do you want to know more about the Catholic Church? It's truly just inquiry for that first fall period, usually from approximately September until approximately December. The end goal, if somebody chooses to be Catholic, it doesn't mean that you've made the commitment at that point, but if somebody chooses to, is that the rites of initiation the sacraments of initiation, would all take place on Easter, at the Easter Vigil. So it's the big liturgy of our year. I feel as if I could give a lot more detail, but I also feel as if I'd like to hear from Rabbi Urecki, because I don't know much about, I'd let you ask the question, but I want to know this about Judaism as well.
Would you let me join the synagogue, Rabbi?
I'll have to think about it. First of all, thank you, CCUM, for hosting us, and also Reverend Bias for a really wonderful deep dive into the Methodist traditions. Our new format means that it seems like Molly and myself are more potted plants, but I think also what it does instruct us is the Root&Branch is not necessarily about us always teaching, but learning. And we're always learning, and the opportunity to learn at the feet of Reverend Bias has been a real blessing. So thank you. And I like the question about conversion, and thank you, Molly, because that's one of the, I think, misunderstandings people have about Judaism. Because I've heard from some people, you can't become Jewish because you have to be born into it. And there is a truth to that in the sense that Judaism is a culture, civilization, an ethnicity. We share a history together. So there is no necessary act of affirmation that someone who's born into the Jewish faith has to do to become Jewish. One is Jewish by birth. I've also heard people say, well, it's a very grueling, difficult process. And that's not really correct either. One of the things that has always been weighing on the Jewish people has been historical realities. We've been persecuted. It hasn't necessarily been something that we could promote our faith publicly, not without fear of death. There was also many times in history where if we tried to convert someone, we would be put to death, and we were also forced to be converted to other faiths. So as a result, you don't see Judaism with a lot of this, welcoming. And part of that is because we're not worried about someone's salvation, which is another component which we've talked about in many Root and the Branches, that we're not worried about saving someone's soul. There's a beautiful sentence in the Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, Chasidei umot ha'olam yesh lachem chelek olam haba, which is all righteous people have a share in the world to come. So there's no fear of saving someone's soul. However, if somebody wants to become part of the Jewish faith, and all kidding aside, Mark, we would welcome you. The process is rather simple. It's somewhat a little bit more complicated because we also have denominations. Imagine that. Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox. But generally, there's a period of study. Depending on the community, depending on the congregation, it might be done one-to-one with, for example, Rabbi Berman or Rabbi Blair at Temple Israel. In larger communities, they might have a community class that's being offered where all the rabbis are teaching a class in Judaism, and then after that period of study, they would go to the respective congregation or denomination that they're most comfortable with, be it Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox, and then each congregation or denomination might have their own final things that need to be done. Minimally, according to Judaism, is the circumcision for men. If a person is circumcised, the Orthodox tradition does require what is called hatafat dam brit, which is a symbolic circumcision that takes place. In the Reform, I believe it's much more looser and open to interpretation. There's a ritual bath. There's an appearance before what is called a bet din, a Jewish court of either 3 rabbis or or one rabbi and two lay leaders, where the person presents themselves and asks that they'd like to be part of the Jewish faith. And there's a lot more, and I'm sure Rabbi Berman, I'm missing a lot of stuff here, but we do welcome the conversion.
Ritual bath. Talk to us about that. How is that similar or dissimilar to baptism?
It's very similar. I mean, it's the mikvah, which we have in our congregation. We're very blessed to have a mikvah, a ritual bath.
Which is?
I describe it's a big pool. It's a baptismal, if you will, and it is done upon conversion, but it's also used for other methods for purification before the holidays. Some members of the Jewish community
And is a
might like
person
to.
taken under the water or not?
Oh, the person goes underwater, yeah.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
are you still interested?
Sure.
I mean, the circumcision didn't scare you off, but the mikveh is scary. The ritual bath is what you have more questions on. Okay.
Okay, let's get to the end here, and we want all three of the panelists to take 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. Molly, we'll let you go first, and Rabbi, and Pastor Tim, we'll let you be the last speaker.
Pastor Tim, my paternal grandmother was Methodist, and she was the one. My family, at least, we always credited her. She's passed for probably 30 years now, but we've credited her for the incredible sense of service. Now, I'm a Catholic, and we have a pretty good sense of service, but her sense of service was gritty, is the way I describe it. She had a sense that if you had an extra bed, you looked out for who might need it. And I'm thankful to say that I think that she did a good job of instilling that in her Catholic grandchildren as well. But I've really valued that, and you had that term of social holiness, isn't that what you said? And when you said it, I thought that is what she witnessed for me. So I am so grateful. I've seen that here in Charleston, I think specifically of St. Mark's and the outreach that they're doing right now. I've seen so much. It seems as if when I think of Methodists, I trust them. I trust you to be out and doing the good service for that social holiness, the gritty things that need to be done to meet people's needs. And I've just kind of been seeped in that respect. So thank you for that. Thank you to the denomination for that.
Thank you. Rabbi?
Reverend Bias, you mentioned a lot of history, and I'm no real student of the B'nai Jacob history, but if I'm not mistaken, the first official home for the B'nai Jacob synagogue, we started in 1894 in the home of the Neermans, near where St. Francis was. And the Jewish community coming from Eastern Europe, the temple, the Reform community from Germany had already been established, but the Eastern European Jewish community was arriving in great numbers. And when they outgrew the home, who brought us and gave us a home? The Methodist Church. The first official building was an old Methodist church, which we've been listening to with the organ. And I think that it's very beautiful, all coming around in full circle. And there's, for me personally, you mentioned the bishop, and you always listen to the bishop. And I was blessed to know and revere Bishop Grove of blessed memory. And the last time I was here, and the last time I was actually up here, was eulogizing him. He was a poet, he was a brilliant man, and he led with goodness and grace, kindness, but he was also a leader in interfaith activities about bringing people together. And I think he is right now looking at this church and smiling at the fact that CCUM is hosting this, because this would be the thing that would make him most happy. So thank you for hosting us for this.
Thank you. Pastor Tim, last word.
Molly, my biological father was a Roman Catholic. But it didn't end quite the same way as your grandmother, because he and my mother were married, and then that marriage was annulled. And then I was, with her second marriage, she married a Methodist.
must have worked out well.
The only reason I say that is that when Wesley was pulling together all the things for the Methodist movement, there was a term that was used in history at one time called plundering the Egyptians. He took pieces of all the traditions around him that he thought were the best traditions and brought them together to start the Methodist movement, and whether that was from the Jewish tradition, whether that was Roman Catholic, whether that was Church of England, or even from Calvin. He was bringing things together to put this movement together. The one thing that's, and I'm sure it's part of the blood that runs in my veins, one thing I am sure of that all of us need to help people in the Charleston area recapture is that we're in this thing together. And regardless of the God we say we worship, if it's based upon that love, if we start with that, then all these divisions that we have can be overcome. It's when we start with the divisions that we have our difficulty. And when we don't have political divisions, we try to make religious divisions. And we've lived with those for years. But I think as we join hands and join hearts and continue to focus upon that love of God that we know in and through our own traditions, that we could actually make a difference in Charleston. Now, let me close with this, Mark, and you've been very kind to number one, not come to Christ Church, but want me to do some speaking. So that's the real kindness in this. But there was a time where there was a Jewish journalist who joined forces with Nathan Hatch at Notre Dame. They did a study to find out what changed changed England, because some of the things that were going on in England in the 18th century were the very things that we face even today. And their study found out, and I'm not saying this because it's more important than anything else, but their study found out that there was a movement called Methodism started by John Wesley that had political, social, and economic implications. And they were asking the question, do we need to start studying those Methodists to find out what they did so we could begin to help America? George Will, who all of us know as a journalist, said that they might have something, because what he said was there was a French Revolution, a German Revolution, but they didn't have an English Revolution. And then he said, but they did. It was called the Methodist Revolution. And he went on to say some other things, but then there was another man by the name of Barnes, and Barnes said they both were correct, but they missed the point. They said it had political, social, and economic implications, but the movement at heart was a movement of the Spirit, which I interpret being focusing upon this love of God. And he said, unless we get back to that, all the political, economic, social things that we focus on aren't going to make a difference. It'll only be when we get back to who we are, who God created us to be, and we're doing this together. All that's to say thank you for being seen with me in public. I'll be better. My idea of all of life is that God puts people in my life so I can become more who I'm supposed to be. And regardless of all of you, these two people, we'll count Mark too, will make me a better person, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a yellow pad making its way around. We just want your email, if you would. It'll only be used to tell you about the future meetings we're having. Thanks to Christ Church, the folks that have helped, all these refreshments. David, thank you very, very much. And how about this panelist up here? So thank you. Now the best part is not the refreshments, although those will be great, but you can ask all these folks any questions you want. Thank you. You were great.